Okay, so it's another session where we actually have an overview of the RAM parameter, which is kind of a nifty tool when you're dealing with all kinds of data. So this is more of an example than it is a tutorial. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive in over here in our new session. I'm gonna drop in a primitive line, and that's what we're gonna use to demonstrate the whole use of the RAM parameter. So I'm gonna give it a distance of 5, probably 50 points, and that should be enough to demonstrate the whole scenario. So I'm gonna put my point display on, just to be fancy, I guess. I don't know. Then what I'm gonna go ahead and do is drop in a null, so we can actually just put all our, we can dump pretty much all our parameters and stuff in it. So you can right click on this and edit parameter interface, or you can edit parameter interface from here. I'm gonna go ahead and name it ramps in that case, probably capital R would be better, ramps. And I'm gonna go ahead and edit the interface, parameter interface, and you got two kind of ramps, color and float. So I'm gonna drop in a float for beginners, and for this guy I'm gonna make him invisible, and this one I'm gonna call it size. We're gonna use it to manipulate size later on, and I'm gonna just give it a label of size. And I'm gonna drop in another one while we still at it, and I'm gonna actually name this one rot, and this one's gonna be rotation. So we're gonna use these two for rotation, and I'm gonna go ahead and add the color while I'm still over here, so we just finish up with the whole parameter dropping thing. So all colors or something, whatever, and accept. And now you got um, three ramps pretty much, two are floats, and one is color. So now the ramp actually accepts data in between a 0. As you can tell from this one, this is a value 0, and this one the value is 1, so it accepts that only in a 0 to 1 range. So in our case, being that we don't manipulate our data in between the points over here, we need to find a way to give the ramps over here a 0 to 1 attribute. So under attribute over here, we can actually do an attribute create, and there's a few ways which you actually do it. Since in Houdini typically everything can be manipulated, at least there's more than one way of skinning the cat. So in our case, we're gonna call this attribute 0 1 without the extra 0. And the way you can actually get this, you can actually take every point number, which is a $pt, and divide it by all the points, which is npt, and that should give you an attribute, which is a new attribute. So if you right click that and get the spreadsheet, you got an attribute now called 0 1, and it actually stretches from 0 all the way down to 0.98. So it ain't technically 1, but you can still work with that since it's almost a value of 1. So that's one way you could actually get the data out. Or depending on how fancy you want to be or techy you want to be, and the material over here, you can drop a UV texture, plug it in over here, and if you drop it in on the orthographic y-axis, it drops all the data on the Z channel over here. Let me see what would happens if I drop it on the X, on the Z. So pretty much I'll just leave it on default for now, and well, as you can tell, that just swaps out the data. So now you can actually use another attribute create over here, and you're gonna call the attribute same thing. I'm gonna just name it the same thing, 0 1. And in this particular instance, you can actually use the point expression to get the data out of the UV texture. The being that actually, I didn't actually show that, but the spreadsheet over here gives the data from 0 to 1. In our case, exactly 1. So we just need to extract that out of the UV texture and give that to an attribute over here, so we can actually get the texture file, texture sop in our case. And the floating point number is $pt to get every single point, and the UV attribute is what we're gonna get as the string attribute, and the float index would be 2 in our case, being that it has three component So you can see 0, 1, and 2 has this is the second float index, so that's why we use the 2, and we get all the data mapped into this as the 0, 1. So you can use that, or you can use that directly on the, as you can see later, as you'll see later. Now I'm gonna go ahead and drop in another attribute create over here, and if I middle mouse click on this, the UV data is not globalized, as you can tell over here. It's not globalized. What I mean by globalized, it doesn't have these global mapping. I mean, like, you see how this has the uh, variable mapping, which is actually 0, 1, which is all capitalized. And I'm saying globalized, that's because in Python, that's actually how you actually make the attribute become all caps like this. That's why I'm actually saying it like that. So hope I don't sound confusing or nothing like that. But now I'm gonna go ahead and create this attribute over here called 0, 1 again. And if I name it UV2 maybe, to get the data out, you see it's still red. So you can see it says that undefined variable in whatever. But what if I change this to a bigger number, like 3 maybe? Nothing still happens. So obviously something ain't working out right. Oops. If I can make this 3 maybe, nothing happens. It's a float, everything is correct, but something ain't working. Why is that? As you can tell, our data doesn't, Houdini doesn't actually show the color. Well, there you go. So what you actually do over here is drop in attribute create over here right before the text is up, right before that. And what you want to name it is actually just U and V, enter, and just make it a 3 float value attribute over here. And this one just drops in 0 values, being that you didn't assign anything over here. But the procedural way of Houdini, being that this is UV and this one is also called UV, but it's down the stream, it just outputs the whole mapping under the UV custom attribute variable. And now if you come over here and if you check on this, you have a UV3, of which I really can't even tell why it's a 3, but if you put a 2, it would give you zeros, in our case being that so this is our attribute create 3. So you got our UV data on the second float index, but you actually need to put a 3 over here to make it work. So here we go, and I just need to make it a float value of 1, so just get all the data over here. So that's the few ways you could actually get the data out of the SOPs over here. Or actually there's another way. I didn't even think about that till now, but you can also use VOPs to get the data out, which in our case, if I could plug this in right here, I'm gonna go ahead and right click on this and say spreadsheet, so we can see all the attributes as we create them. And under our VOPs up over here, you can actually take convert integer to float. I'm gonna go ahead and just copy paste that one more time, and now you can just plug in the point number and plug in the total number of points, and now under math you can actually just get a divide and plug that in, and all you need to do now is under geometry just add an attribute, which in our case will be a float, and you can just call it the same thing, 0, 1, and bam, so you get the same attribute all over again. So that's just another way you could actually do it, depending if you don't want like expressions or for whatever reason it is. So that's enough time manipulating data, so let's go ahead and start knocking down the RAM parameter, finish this up. It's kind of nifty, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so continuing with this, we're gonna go ahead and put these boys aside over here. So this is experimental stuff. You can just collapse that, and we have a little tiny box. So now we're just going to go ahead and use this particular whatever. So in my case, I know I'm gonna be using a copy SOP to copy some boxes and copy all the data to our box, like I just said, which I'm gonna use a transform to manipulate the size pretty much. And typically you want to leave the original primitive as it is and use a transform. Well, that's kind of a rule that I did for myself, but you know, it ain't really, you know. Okay, so if I can go ahead and what's up with this box is size 1, and if I copy those, this one, okay, now I'm gonna reduce this to a 1 value or something close, probably just a little bit smaller. And now we're gonna go ahead and stamp all the attributes onto the second side over here. So now we can actually go ahead and do the, which one is on top, size. We can do the size, so we can drop an attribute create over here. We can call it size, and on our value over here we can actually use a channel ramp expression, which asks for the string path, which is actually right above it. So in our case that would be ramps slash size, right? So that's the path of our string ramp, and our flow position in our case would be 0 1, being that that's the attribute that we created to get our 0 to 1 range, and the component index is a floating 0. It's a 0 since it's a float value, and now we have the whole size attribute in you know, a 0 to 1 range. So pretty much it's mapping out all the values. So over here we can actually go to the stamp feature, and under input you can actually call this size, and attribute over here is actually called size, right? So over here we can actually go ahead and just use size. Now on that transform over here, we can actually go ahead and scale the, let's see, x and z values. So we can actually go ahead use a stamp. If I can type, copy 1, and the attribute name is size, and the float index will be 0. Now you can see that our points get typed in, being that it's reading all the values from 0 to 1. Now the reason for that being that the line over here has all the points, as you can tell, from 0 to 1 over here on the top, 1 being the biggest value. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy this attribute 2 more times, I believe. Copy, tab, paste, enter. And now what I have is, well, probably for this one I just want to leave it at 0.1 as it was earlier, as I said, x and z. So now we can actually use the ramps for the size over here to manipulate our data as we want accordingly, you know, to manipulate. So you can actually do pretty funky stuff with this. And let's go ahead and do the rotation. Now rotation is going to be a little bit tricky, being that it goes from 0 to 360, but our values over here go from 0 to 1. So in our case we can actually use rotation right here directly without having to create an attribute. Can we do that? I think we can, so let's try. So we're gonna actually use a channel ramp which goes from 0 to 1, but we need to fit that in a 0 to 360. So I actually need to go ahead and do a fit, of which in our case what we're gonna fit is this expression right here, and ramps is what we're gonna get slash rotation, and the flow position will be our 0 1 attribute which we created, and the float index will be 0. So it's gonna ask for float all minimum, which will be 0, and the float old maximum, which will be 1. Our new maximum is 0, and our new maximum, our new old minimum is new minimum is 0. The old new maximum is 360, and close that and enter. We have no errors, so under our rotation over here we can rotate it under, let's see, Y. Yep. So you can go ahead and stamp this, and it's gonna be from the copy SOP, and the rotation is what we want to get, and 0 is gonna be the value. Now, well, it doesn't show anything because now you actually need to come to the ramp over here and actually rotate this, or actually put a value up, so you actually get the rotation values as is. So pretty much you got that mapped out as far as for rotation, so we can actually rotate this however you want, and you get the, depending on what kind of, you can get a drill, I guess, out of this or something. But let's go ahead and do the colors while we add it. So we can actually go ahead and do the colors in the same way with like this one. So we can actually just, without having to create another attribute create node, we can actually just go ahead and do the channel ramp, and we're gonna do this one. I just want to do ramps slash color, and 01 attribute is what we want to get, and 0 with the float index. Now we can actually go ahead and map out the color. And how would I map out the color on this one? Oh boy, never even thought of that before I came over here. But I really don't know how to map out the colors on this one. Do I? Let me figure that out. But while I figure that out, I'm gonna go ahead and start on the VOPs, so you can actually see how we can manipulate the whole data in VOPs. So let's go ahead and do VOPs. Okay, so after my little brain freeze, let's go ahead and get the colors in this. So under material over here, we're gonna drop in a color, and no, we don't want to dive inside. And under our, I know we had created this already earlier, which is with the with the 0 at the very end of it. So now in this one, we're actually gonna rename it to the letter R, and I'm actually lazy like that. Like, and I cannot even type that many stuff. So Control V and B, and I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, paste it, but instead of 0 at the very end, I'm gonna put a 1, and paste it again. Instead of 0, I'm gonna put a 2. The reason for this is that the values over here correspond to the RGB attributes created by the ramp over here. As you can tell, it has three colors over here, which if I could that's that's not even the default, but if you put on the default, you go black to black and white. So I'm gonna go ahead over here and I'm having a little error over here because of color B over here. I need to change it to RGB, and under my color over here, I can actually go ahead and stamp all the color values in, being that in 3 component values. In our case, that's from copy SOP, and the attribute is color R, and the float index would be 0. Right, so you get our first attribute. So I'm gonna just copy this, tab, paste, and this is not an R but a G, and tab, paste, and this is not a G, not a R but a B. And now we get a ramp over here, which if we actually create some more points, you can actually get all the colors as is necessary. So that's how you'd actually get your colors out of the second side and bring it to the right side, left side, and map them out. So time to do VOPs. So in VOPs, how we gonna actually deal with the whole thing, of which I remember we do have a VOPs app we did earlier. I'm gonna go ahead and plug this into actually I don't even have to plug this in. Let me just go ahead. We have a VOPs up over here already. I'm gonna go ahead and use this guy over here to do this stuff for us, which I'm gonna plug him in right here. So we actually do have a 0, 1 attribute in this one, but we created this directly in VOPs, as you can tell. So we can actually do the same thing all over. Now being that I'm lazy, I'm actually go ahead and copy my box, paste it, over here. I'll put my VOPs up right here, and it's gonna be directly to the copy SOP, and I'm gonna drop a transform. So in that case, this will be 0.09, I believe it was, and everything else should be straight. So under VOPs up over here, you can actually go ahead and create everything that we need. So we're gonna do our under utility. You got a ramp parameter, which you can plug in the data from here. Now in our case, this one does a color, so we can call this color. You always want to rename your attributes in VOPs because any conflict results in the data not being output correctly. So plug this in, and I got a okay, that's a global attribute. So okay, Mr. There we go. So now we got a ramp over here, which I'm gonna change the colors a little bit to the, you know, the usual Jamaican colors. And no, I'm not from Jamaica. So we got that, and Ethiopian flag. Okay, now we can actually go ahead and use our stamp attributes to, that's easy as that, as far as for that one. So that's one done. So we're gonna go ahead and do one for the size. So being that we got this 0 to 1 attribute, we're gonna create another ramp, and we're gonna name this to size, and it's a spline ramp, and we're gonna go ahead and add an attribute where you had this stuff put out earlier, and this one's gonna be size. And while we're at it, we're gonna go ahead and do the rotation. So I'm gonna just copy this, paste that, and I'm actually naming this to rot, ROT, and the last one to rotate, the attribute to rotation. So over here on the top, I got the original ramp, the color ramp, the size, and the rotation ramp. So I got 2 more ramps, more same thing as we had with the null over here. So same ideology. So over here, what we need to do is actually go ahead create another attribute, and this one is called ROT, and pretty much that's it for the VOPs app. So you just, out of that, you just create a ramp parameter, create an attribute create, and pretty much that's it for VOPs. Now all you need to do now is actually copy this stuff to the stamp it pretty much. So we're gonna stamp the size, which will be we're gonna use the point expression in this case to get the data out of the VOPs app, and the data in our case is a floating point position of every single point, which is a $PT, and the string attribute in our case will be size, being that we're dealing with size, and the 0 will be the float index. Enter. Now I'm lazy, so I'm gonna just copy this, paste it, and over here for the size, I'm gonna just change it to ROT. Enter. Change the variable mapping to ROT, and pretty much the same thing that we did earlier. So over here, all I need to do now for the scale in the X and Z is actually stamp the copy SOP to and the value that we want to stamp is size, and 0 will be the first one. And I'm gonna go ahead and copy this, tab, paste, and enter. And we have a problem because it just minimizes everything to almost nothing. So I'm gonna, oh, there we go. This is the problem. Everything is 0 over here, so we can actually now um, size it up as we want. Now you're gonna go ahead and do the rotation. Now rotation is already ramped up, so you can go ahead and do the rotation. So pro is done, so we're gonna rotate it in the Y. So I'm gonna just copy this, paste it in the Y over here, and change this to ROT. Enter. Control B to get out. And did I do something wrong? Nope. Let's see. Oh, the values coming out of this, out of the rotation values, if you actually rename this ramp, not trying to be rude with the caps, but ramp rotation, what we need to do actually under utility over here, you got a fit range, which you need to fit 0 to 1 to a new value, which is 0 to 360, of which now our thing does the thing as it's supposed to be. And pretty much that's the overview under the with the RAM parameter. So I mean, now it's up to you to kind of figure out more ways to do stuff with the RAM parameter. It's a really cool parameter, and yeah, deserves its own little tutorial, kind of sorta. So yeah. Anyways, I'm out of here. I'm gonna see you on the next one for so. Out.